Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luke Nixon Jansen, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Magnet, a part of Ryerson University and part of the Faculty of Innovation and Research. I'd like to begin with thanking everyone for joining us today and hearing from our panelists, who I know will share some really great insights as to building future-ready communities, something very topical, coast to coast to coast in Canada. Before I do, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous people of the lands that we are on today. And while we meet here today virtually, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands in which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving our relationships between nations and to improving our personal understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. So I'd ask that you please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. So welcome to the PEI Roundtable discussion, Reskilling for Greater Prosperity. The purpose of this series was created with the intention of breaking down silos across different sectors, and is really meant to create opportunities for cross-sectoral dialogue between community-based employment agencies, post-secondary institutions, and employers across Canada on issues related to the future of work. The roundtable discussion is consisting of bringing together subject matter experts, leaders in our industry, in our communities, from chambers of commerce right across Canada. And through an open conversation, these panelists can share their knowledge, experience, and lessons learned, which I think is really important. I've had the privilege of working across Canada in 3 different provinces, and I've noticed there's a common thread throughout these communities that we all share. So this knowledge mobilization and sharing with one another is extremely, extremely important. So today's discussion, Reskilling for Greater Prosperity, will really dive into the topic of how how reskilling and upskilling initiatives can help employers and communities combat skills gaps for now and the years to come. I am one of those folks who was displaced during COVID-19, so it touches me personally in terms of my own personal journey, being displaced from an industry and having to now pivot and look at reskilling and upskilling and acquiring new tools that will help me as an employee be better equipped. So I would like now to introduce our moderator for this session, Chantal Bryan, who is the CEO of Endpoint. Some of you may know Chantal, who will introduce the panelists and get our discussion going. So without any further ado, Chantal, over to you.
Thanks, Luke. And I'll echo Luke's gratitude. Thank you all for making time to join us, and to our amazing panelists who I've gotten to know. Either if I didn't get to meet you already, then this was the first of a couple conversations leading up to today's event. And then I've had the pleasure of knowing a couple of the organizations and some folks on the call for a couple months now. And so this is a really interesting time for us to be talking about reskilling and upskilling. And the theme was reskilling and upskilling for greater prosperity. So I'm very excited to introduce our amazing panelists from PEI, from Nova Scotia, and really going to be talking about national level initiatives and regional initiatives that relate to this theme. Please allow me just a little bit of time here to share a little bit about our panelists. Panelists, as I introduce you, please feel free to give a wave and or at least smile, although I know it can be awkward hearing somebody read your bio. Just want to give our audience listening with us now, but also those that are going to come back to the series later on and watch the recording, a little bit of context for why it is that we were excited or are excited to welcome you to share your own lessons learned and stories related to today's and this month's theme. So in no particular order, except what you are on my paper, I'm going to introduce, first starting off with Wendy McIsaac. Wendy, hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here.
Thank you, Wendy. Wendy is currently the Program Director for the Canadian Alliance for Skills and Training in Life Sciences. You will absolutely probably hear both Wendy and myself refer to that as CASTL throughout today's conversation, so now you know what that means. Wendy is passionate about people, education, public policy, and lifelong learning. During her career, she has worked in the not-for-profit, public, and education sectors in varying roles, which is perfect, Wendy, because those are the groups that we're bringing together today, right? She's worked in a variety of roles as well, from public school teacher to adult educator to human resources manager, policy advising, and client services. So again, really hitting on a bunch of those different perspectives that we're going to be excited to dive into today. In all of that, Wendy has demonstrated success in leading initiatives in education, strategic planning, HR management, public policy, legislative implementation, and governance. She holds a bachelor's degree in community studies in English and a master's degree in English from the University of Western Ontario. Also a bachelor's degree in education from St. Mary's University. Didn't realize that, Wendy. I'm also a SMU alum.
There you go.
Small worlds, right? Wendy is also an avid baker, very cool, and an emerging writer. Her writing has been featured on CBC and in various literary journals. Very cool. She also proudly represented PEI on season 2 of CBC TV's Great Canadian Baking Show after being chosen as one of Canada's top 10 self-taught bakers. So cool. I think we could have a convo about that maybe, Bill. I don't know.
Maybe another webinar on that. Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll make everybody's mouth water as we talk about reskilling and upskilling in the baking industry, perhaps.
It's all kind of baking in the end. So we'll talk a bit more about that.
Awesome. And I'm going to allow Wendy, when we get into the first question, I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about CASTL, and I'm just going to continue to kind of introduce the rest of our panelists from there.
Yep.
So next up, we have Judith Darden, from Digital Nova Scotia. Hello, Judith. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, everybody.
Also thrilled to have Judith be able to share from her perspective here. So in addition to Judith's formal education in business administration, she brings over 12 years experience in project management and event management, and 7 years experience focused on the philanthropic and nonprofit industries. Currently, as a project manager for Digital Nova Scotia, Judith manages 2 career building programs designed to support the demand for talent in Nova Scotia and soon to be Atlantic Canada. Now I'm going to allow Judith to tell you about those programs when we get into things, but that's your primer for folks listening here. Prior to Digital Nova Scotia, Judith managed an energy innovation project in support of the Paris Agreement mandate, helping Indigenous communities to create and execute clean energy missions. She has been involved with trade missions and has managed matchmaking, logistics, and organization for trade missions inbound and to Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, the EU, and Greenland. Judith was born in Mexico and raised in a family that valued diversity, culture, and world travel. And she's been proud to call Nova Scotia home for over 22 years. Pretty, I think, rich that we get to speak with somebody from that perspective as well, Judith, as a, person who has 2 homes as well, right? Home number 1 in Bermuda for me and home 2 here in Canada. So thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chantal.
And last but not least, joining us from PEI is Bill DeBlois. Bill, did I say that correct even after asking you?
No, that's okay.
Did not. I apologize. Thought to myself, that it was not correct. How do we actually pronounce that? Sorry.
Bill DeBlois.
DeBlois. See, it was the S. Thought my
good.
Acadian heritage was saying, no, we don't pronounce that.
All good.
So Bill's kind of doing double duty here with us today. He is representing and speaking about from his experience as a volunteer member of the board for the Greater Charlottetown Area Chamber of Commerce. And Bill is also an entrepreneur and owner of Buns and Things Bakery in Charlottetown, PEI. In 2014, Bill returned home to PEI to join the family business of Buns and Things. Prior to that, though, I also thought this was pretty cool, Bill. He was responsible for marketing and sales with Legendary Motor Car. I think so cool to see that switch. And I loved the fact that in your LinkedIn profile, you referred to that as a job that growing up you would have referred to as your dream job. I think there's some cool things there that we could probably tease into today's conversation.
Sure.
Bill currently, like I said, mentioned, volunteers with the Greater Charlottetown Area of Chamber of Commerce, which is PEI's largest business advocacy organization committed to supporting and connecting business members. Today, they have a diverse network of businesses representing almost every industry and business profession, with more than 1,100 business members and more than 20,000 employees. The Chamber's united voice draws attention to local business needs. So today, I think we've got a great opportunity, Bill, to talk from your perspective as both that volunteer board, but also as an entrepreneur yourself who has to hire, retain, and do all the fun things with talent to run your own business. So thank you, Bill, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So now that that's out of the way, and our folks have a little bit of context for all of the amazing perspectives that each of you bring with us, let's dive into the questions. And they are big and broad. And we do a little bit of whoever's off mic first. I might pick on you, so there's your heads up. But I am going to start with you, Wendy. You're at the top of my screen. And I'm going to ask you, and you can maybe weave in a little bit around what CASTL does as an organization as well for some context. But what comes to mind when you think about the theme of reskilling and upskilling, and this whole idea of building future-ready communities from your perspective? What comes to mind for you?
Before I sort of tell you a little bit about CASTL, I think I'll sort of start to answer that question. I think I'll sort of segue back into it, hopefully in a sort of a full circle kind of discussion. But when I think of building future-ready communities, I don't sort of think of it from my current role. I think of it from truly the entirety of my own career, because you mentioned, my very first degree was a Bachelor of Arts in Community Studies. So I think from the time I was a very young, teenager, I was always very interested in community and community building and what makes us successful, sustainable communities, and why do some communities adapt and transition and adapt to change successfully, and why do some communities not? So I think that that's a question that's been on my mind for a very, very, very long time. And what I think of when I think of that is my entire sort of life and work experience has, and I thought a lot about this question. It was a very, very, very good question, Chantal. What comes to mind is building a future-ready community means preparation in the present. It means planning for the future. Every successful community, just like every successful individual, there's planning involved to achieve success. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere and it's an unexpected surprise, but more often than not, it's definitely thinking about where you are and where you want to be. And a community is no different than an individual in that context. So I'm going to segue that into CASTL, the Canadian Alliance for Skills and Training in Life Sciences, CASTL for short. CASTL has been in existence since early April, late March 2020, which is not a long time if you think about it. But in that short period of time, we have managed to, develop and implement quite a few programs in a number of different program areas. And again, I'd say that's all about planning for the future by doing some pretty serious planning and preparation in the present. Who we are is our organization, we really specialize in skills development and training related to the life science sector and the biopharmaceutical manufacturing sector in particular. But we exist to really help to develop and generate a pool of talent for the bioscience sector and the biopharmaceutical manufacturing sector within the province, the region, and the country. So we are very much involved every single day in that whole skills development piece. And one of the programs that we do run that's particular to reskilling is we have developed, and with our partner Holland College here in PEI, we deliver a CASTL reskilling program. We've delivered that successfully. We have 2 graduated cohorts, and we're in the midst of our 3rd cohort. And we are hopeful that we will continue to have multiple cohorts in the coming year. And that program really is, it's been designed, it's been envisioned and designed and developed, and it's delivered with, for adults who are either unemployed or underemployed or in mid-career transition for any number of reasons. And so it is really designed to give them the fundamental skills and knowledge that they need in a short, focused, intense, sharp way so that they are really work ready to enter into the bioscience sector here in the province. Because as some of you may or may not be aware, the bioscience sector here in the province it's a major contributor to the economy of the province. But the bioscience sector, regionally and across the country, especially because of, and we can't have a conversation these days without talking about the impact of COVID, but the emergence of COVID in Canada has really highlighted some significant need in terms of creating at-home Canadian-made solutions in terms for vaccine production, for example. So last in the budget, the last federal budget, the federal government committed, literally billions and billions of dollars to shoring up that sector. The reality is that you can build all the facilities in the world, but if you don't have the talent to actually work and produce those products inside those facilities, we're not any farther ahead. So our focus is on the talent and to ensure that industry is sustainable into the future. So that was a lot in a short period of time.
Well, and I think we hit all of the hot points within them. And this is why for folks that are joining that have been at another one of our events, you're used to the idea that, and what we do here is we're weaving themes throughout many conversations across the country over a year, and unpacking all of that and really trying to do that through sharing examples like what you just so gratefully shared, Wendy, in terms of that one program that I know you've got more of and different that we'll get into, but it is those on the ground examples that we hope other folks listening in or who will soon be listening in can take and apply to their own region, their own industry or subsegment thereof. And of course, we can't have a conversation these days not talking about the pandemic and what we've learned through that, both maybe some eye-opening things that we didn't necessarily, that aren't great, but using that quite frankly as an opportunity to build back better, which is very relevant to today's topic. So thank you for that very, very well opening high level remarks. And I think, Bill, you are unmuted, so I'm coming to you next. And from a different perspective. So same question in terms of when you think about building future ready communities, and from your perspective, again, as an entrepreneur, as a member of the Chamber's board of directors there, just what comes to mind for you in terms of those big themes?
I guess when it comes down to preparation, it's like Wendy said, when you're dealing with preparation and planning, and I think another word to add to that is adaptability, and seeing how the community can adapt to changes that are happening. And I think a lot of changes were happening, and someone brought up the C word, COVID, there earlier, and that has kind of accelerated everything that was already happening. And I think we're kind of seeing that already. And workforces are making changes for different reasons now as well. People are changing career paths, they're changing objectives, what they're looking to get out of their careers. Some people had ended up in jobs that maybe they'd started out in their 20s and felt comfortable with. The next thing you know, 15 years has gone by, and COVID kind of created this kind of break where all of a sudden it was a realization moment where maybe I don't like what I'm doing. And so now there seems to be this change in shift from jobs and careers and what people are looking to get out of that. And I've noticed that running a small business. We have a staff of between 30 and 35, depending on what point in the year it is. And you really notice what motivates people, what gets them going, and what gives them happiness out of what they're doing, which seems to be a bigger priority now. There's a lot of focus on dollars and cents, but at the end of the day, people are more focused on getting more out of their life and more out of enjoyment out of what they're doing, which, in my particular case, I own a bakery. In some ways, it's kind of worked a little bit to our advantage. I would hesitate to say it was a good thing. But, you know, baking is a hobby. People enjoy it. I don't tell Wendy about this. But people have seen this as an opportunity to, maybe I can make a change and I can try doing this as a job and as a career and see if I can make a living out of it. And that's been an interesting shift to notice change. And in addition to the new Canadians that are coming to PEI, and that's a whole other market of employees, and they're also taking the opportunity to make a shift and a change towards something they enjoy. I had talked to Chantal earlier about one particular example. We had a woman from the Middle East who had a job in an office, always enjoyed baking at home. When they moved to Canada and they came to PEI, it seemed like a great opportunity to let me focus on something that I enjoy. And she's a absolutely phenomenal talent that we're very fortunate to have. And that was more of a change out of desire. But then at the same time, we have another gentleman from China who realized that his English wasn't good enough for a sales career like he had. So he focused on a career he could do with his hands. And so then he went out got some education and some training in pastry arts, and now he's another great talent that we're fortunate to have. So there's a lot of people making shifts and changes for various reasons, and the adaptability of the industry and the province and the community there, I'm pulling it back together. This is where, I mean, we have to be prepared for that, and we have to be ready to open, embrace this with open arms, because these are changes that are happening to the community, no matter how prepared we are for it or not. And how prepared we are and how ready for it's going to determine how successful it is.
Fair points. I appreciate that too, Bill, and some great stories even in that first kind of introductory there. Looking.
I used all my great answers for number 2 already. I don't know what I'm going to come up with. So.
I think that the beauty of these conversations, I think so many threads there, right? When we look at all of themes already in terms of turning chaos through COVID into opportunity at a personal level, but also in those one-off examples, but in the grand scheme of things aren't really one-offs. You can start to see the trends within a region, within an industry, and I think that's the cool part.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not special or unique just because we're a bakery. This is happening across various industries, various markets, everything. This comes back to the bioscience stuff that Wendy was touching on. People are making these changes for various reasons. These are just small examples of a couple of individuals and what they did, but this is definitely not market specific, that's for sure.
And I think we might pull at that thread a little bit, looking at the hospitality sector as a whole, and then bubble that up in some subsequent questions too. But I want to bring Judith, you in here from your perspective. Again, when you think about reskilling and upskilling and the idea of building future-ready communities, from your vantage point, just tell us what comes to mind for you. What are those key themes?
Yes, thank you, Chantal. I think that I want to take it from a very personal perspective. So, and I will tie as well as what Wendy and Bill mentioned, how important is planning and adaptability to reskill and upskill. So I have to agree with Luke as well. COVID has been a catalyst for transformation, certainly. I was one of those folks as well who needed to pivot. I was in the hospitality sector, and since the last 3 years, everything changed. So I needed to find ways to determine what is going to be plan B. We're not ready then. Everybody was trying to figure out what is going to happen. How are people going to be retrained? And I always had a passion for international trade, and I saw a great opportunity to upskill and reskill by taking a certification. It was very intense. And at the time when it was finished, I realized that, okay, I have finished, but then what are the job opportunities? How can I have gathered all this knowledge? It's new, but how am I going to apply it if I have not worked in that particular area per se? So I think that came for me in a way, the way to think, okay, there must be a way that we can bridge that gap of people that are retraining to gather new skills and to help them build those skills by entry, by having entry-level positions, by connecting them with industry. I got an excellent opportunity to work with Digital Nova Scotia. And it has been my motivation, in a way, my personal experience as an immigrant, to leverage those opportunities that I personally lived. So I have to agree that planning and adaptability are huge to the success of what we said that we want to do. So I will touch base about the programs that we're building, the career building programs, but I just wanted to say that it is very important that in terms of changes, you plan ahead. And there are resources out there that you can leverage, and but also with programs like what Wendy was mentioning about CASTL, programs like Digital Nova Scotia, that they support the individual all the way. So I think that's very important.
I agree. And actually, Judith, I'm going to stick with you and kind of weave us into, let's dive a little bit into some of the success stories that you've experienced. And again, you kind of alluded to those two particular career programs. And definitely doesn't mean it has to just be those two. So if anything else comes to mind, beautiful and great. But I think success stories as it relates to how Digital Nova Scotia has contributed to building future-ready communities. And I think, again, those two programs provide two unique but very well-versed examples to kind of spark some inspirations. Can you maybe just, from your perspective, what comes to mind of success stories, and share a little bit with folks around those programs in particular?
Absolutely. There are a few success stories. So I just want to mention what the career building programs that Digital Nova Scotia is building. So we have Get Into IT, enables Nova Scotian communities who have mainly faced barriers entering the tech sector. It provides digital training, professional tools for upskilling learners from underrepresented communities in tech. And these are, I'm going to touch upon some of the target audience that we have for our Get Into IT program. We have Indigenous persons, Black Nova Scotians, persons of African descent, racially visible individuals, persons with disabilities, immigrants, women, just to mention some. This program does that. It helps building their skills, their new skills, so they can find meaningful job opportunities in the ICT sector at entry-level positions. At the same time, we have Skills for Hire. This was building this was building of the success of Skills for Hire program that we had running for 2 years. Skills for Hire Atlantic will expand its virtual programs across Atlantic Canada. And meaning it's going to be in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland, and Labrador. We will train 1,500 people in the course of 3 years. It's a 100% virtual program, so we can reach out across the 4 provinces. And so right now we're in the process of identifying the learning paths. And these have been developed based on hiring the needs from industry, their hiring needs, industry consultations, and labor market data. So it has been a thorough research as of what are going to be the 2 learning streams that we will be offered, so that we can support individuals who want to upskill or reskill and find that meaningful job opportunities in the tech sector.
Awesome. I think we'll try and find those links to plunk them into the chat there so folks can learn a little bit more about those programs as we kind of get into that. But I think, thank you, Judith, for sharing. And I think that's a beautiful bridge. And Wendy, I'm going to come to you. I think, is there some parallels there in terms of some of the, how CASTL started in terms of, a provincial pilot program first and then learning from that and growing and expanding. So I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on, from your perspective, from CASTL's perspective, what are some of those success stories that you've seen that we can learn from? And or if you've got some stuff that didn't work the way you wanted to, some failures too. So whichever comes to mind first.
I've got it all. I've got it all. So I can tell you about it all. Definitely in terms of success, you know, our reskilling program, like I said, we're in the midst of our third cohort. They're just about finishing up their 8-week in-class piece before they do a 4-week on-the-job placement with employers, large, small, and medium across the province. So of course that started with one pilot, one cohort. And I think there's a few things that we did really well. And I also think there's a few things that I'm glad to say that we learned from to do better as we went on to our subsequent cohorts. I think the first thing that we did is when we were developing and designing the program and we were thinking about sort of the communication piece and really the marketing piece for interested participants, we really knew that that this program would really be very beneficial to not only people in a mid-career transition for whatever reason. You have to remember, this is sort of happening as COVID is actually emerging and evolving and growing and getting larger and larger and looming. But we also knew that this program would likely be of great interest to newcomers to the province, for example, and to women. And we were absolutely right in that. And we did what all good community organizations do. We reached out to other organizations in the community, including the Newcomers Association here. And so to let them know that this was, that we were planning this program and if that was of interest to some of their clients. And so I think we did that piece really, really well. The program, indeed, we had a significant number of newcomers enter into the program. And what's really interesting there, and this, I'll take it into a very sort of a personal conversation that I had with one of the graduates in the program. So every cohort we've seen, we get candidates who, many of whom actually have either you know, education or previous experience in the bioscience or the biotech sector in another country. They come to Canada, and because of you know, accreditation and credentialing and all of those things, they sometimes experience great difficulty in entering into that sector, even though they know that that's actually the thing that they want to do, the thing that they're passionate about. And so I had a conversation with a graduate from our second cohort, and he said to me, he said, I'd been here with my family and I've been trying to get into the sector and I couldn't find a way in. And this program has given me that way in. And now my family and I, you know, we'll stay in PEI. And so I want you to just take a moment and think about that and think about the threads of that and how that connects to so many things. Because the reality is that if any of us as individuals, I mean, we have basic needs that need to be met, and we need, but if, you know, if we feel safe and secure, and if we have employment that feels secure to us, that we feel like there's room for us to grow, then we feel like we're contributing. We feel like we're contributing to a company's success, but we also feel successful in and of ourselves. And let's face it, successful communities are made up of individuals who feel that way. So it's all interconnected. So one small success for an individual is, or a family, is success for that community. And I feel strongly about that. I know, I've seen that. And so there's a very real success story. And we see that with every cohort, that if, again, that sort of background, there's already that interest, it's having that door open so that they can demonstrate that they do have the ability. And sometimes there are, you know, there's knowledge gaps or there's skill gaps that are missing, but that's exactly what this program is designed to do. It's designed to give them that. And from the employer's end, we have employer partners. This program would not be able to even be delivered if we didn't have the support of various employers throughout the province that are working in that are, you know, that their business is aligned with that sector. So because of that employer support, I mean, employers know when those trainees go to do even an on-the-job placement, they know that they are going to be work ready when they start. So for the employer, that means their onboarding process is less onerous, less intense, because they don't have to teach them everything. They come knowing things. And even our employer partners, that we just actually had our session on Friday at Holland College, you know, they participate even in the on-the-job sort of training interviews. We do kind of a sort of an employment speed dating kind of event where they get to come and meet everybody, and the trainees get to meet all the employers, and connection is everything, right? It's everything. So so I would say that you know, that's one of the most memorable success stories. Something that we learned, a good lesson that we learned, is that in our first cohort, when we did our first cohort, we didn't have any sort of pieces in place or any requirements in terms of, for example, numerical literacy, or sort of, you know, or English literacy. We didn't have sort of like minimum standards. And the reality is, when you're in a program that's related to the bioscience sector, having you know, a minimum standard of numerical literacy is really important. You're measuring things, you're doing percentages, you're doing calculations. And so one of the process improvements that we made to that program is that we put an assessment component in place for people, and that's part of the application process. And so and that has worked extremely well. It's something that we're very, very glad that we you know, we learned from that. But I'll also say the reason we learned from that is because from day one, we've evaluated all of the programming that we do. We are heavy on evaluation, and not because any of us loves doing survey, you know, sending out surveys or analyzing data. But I always say I hate math, but I love statistics because they tell you a story. And they really do. So we use evaluation as an important tool to help us understand how do we make something better. So yes, I'll end there because I could talk for days. So I'll just stop now.
And I think I love that, you know, statistics tell a story, right? And the good news for all of us, that I'm also with you on the surveying is not my favorite thing, but the good news is there are people out there who it is their passion.
Love it.
Has come up in this conversation, right?
Exactly.
Some of them might find that that's their passion due to some of the programs, such as the Skills for Hire, or the Get into IT program, where there's such a variety in all of those industries that you can find really nuanced opportunities, right? But you know, I appreciate you mentioning, Wendy, that kind of sometimes what I find gets lost in these conversations around when we're looking specifically maybe at reskilling with a certain industry in mind. There's a whole set of technical knowledge for that particular industry, but there's underlying foundational skills, right? I think, and Luke, who opened for us, probably may have heard it last week as well, at the Future Skills Center was hosting their Future Skills Summit. And in one of the sessions, I can't remember who the panelist was, other than she was a deputy minister within a labor kind of portfolio, and must have been Skills for Canada, I think. She referenced the fact that in one of their most recent surveys, they found that 45% of those respondents did not meet foundational skill requirements according to the survey that they had done. And I think that's pretty important for all of us who are doing work in talent development to be very mindful of. So I think that's a really great call out there. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I think, again, there's so much in this conversation. We all have a role to play in this. And so, Bill, I'm going to ease you into kind of our looking at it from that perspective in terms of, again, macro level lens as an employer, as a member of a community, as a member of the Chamber of Commerce. When you think about the role that you and or others like you play in terms of doing their part, so to speak, as an employer perhaps, or as a Chamber of Commerce, in terms of building future ready communities, what do we need to think about doing, or what do we need to keep doing that is part of our, you know, our role in this big thing?
I guess on different levels, depending what way you want to look at it, we all kind of have the same role, and that we have to be we have to be there to support it and help it in whatever way we can to kind of get its roots and get it going. You know, I guess if I look at it, excuse me, on an individual level, such as myself as a business owner or an employer, you have to see it as an opportunity to be open-minded, get people those opportunities to try and, like I touched on earlier, you know, someone wants to, maybe they had nothing to do with this particular career path or this particular industry at one time, but they show an interest and a desire to do something with it. And you have to be ready to take that chance to give them an opportunity to feel comfortable in it. And as Wendy kind of touched on earlier, your successes are what's going to be helping to build that community. Someone's going to feel, when someone feels more comfortable and successful as a part of that community, then they're more likely to stay. They're more likely to make that their home. They're more likely to want to make that the place where they spend the rest of their life and maybe raise a family. So you're kind of bringing them in, you're trying to nurture them, you're trying to make everybody feel welcome and comfortable in that environment. And I guess that's kind of on an individual level. And at the same time, I guess as an industry or as the Chamber of Commerce, I guess that's where our role ends up kind of being very similar, just on a slightly bigger level. So instead of that individual looking for that job, in my case, as a baker or a cake decorator or something, we're welcoming people from all around the world that are coming here to establish a business or to try to be entrepreneurs here and try and chase that dream that brought them to Canada and to Prince Edward Island in the first place. And the more of a community around them that we can kind of grow and make them feel a part of, then I think that just increases the likelihood of that this being the community that they stay in. You know, like I'm kind of bouncing around here, but if I think about the one individual that came to work for us, I mean, she came here with a son and her husband was here and had started a company. And you know, she didn't necessarily have to come out and get a job, not with us, but the fact that she has her career and he has his, and it allows everyone to feel a part of the community, that increases the likelihood of individuals being willing to stay and be a part of it for a longer period of time. And I think on the same idea with businesses, you know, people join the chamber, they come out, they get to meet other people in similar industries or in similar situations. That comfort level and that community feel is going to be important. So for our role really is to help those that come along and are trying to get themselves started and get themselves going, and whatever way we can do to support that through programs like I'm learning about today with CASTL and stuff like that. Through the chamber, we've got some programs like PEI Connectors, which does a lot of great things where, you know, people can arrive, and if they want to get a foot in the door with an industry, PEI Connectors will connect that individual with an entrepreneur or a connection in that industry that might help them get established as well. So there's a lot of programs out there doing a lot of fantastic things that can kind of help us achieve that role a little bit easier.
Appreciate that, and appreciate, we'll definitely make sure we include the PEI Connectors program in our list of resources in our recap as well there. Judith, same question over to you. From your perspective, from your role at Digital Nova Scotia, the Skills for Higher Atlantic program, what do you view as the role of the organization and yourself and individuals like you working in the talent mobilization reskilling space? What should we be thinking about or doing?
I think that from a career building perspective, as we have the programs that we're building, it is important that we provide them with technical skill building. We have success stories as well, where we have one of the participants came here from abroad, took this program, due to COVID, lost his job. He was not able to find any job opportunities. And after getting into IT, he was able to find employment in the cybersecurity field. That's a success story, but I have to say as well, from another success story from a participant, that it was not so much the technical skill content, it was the confidence that she didn't think that she had exploring the digital sector. Is very scary. And she had always had that passion, but she didn't have the supports in place for her to do this. When she saw the opportunity with getting to IT, which is a no-cost program, 100% virtual, so you can actually reach out to any community in Nova Scotia. that it is a very robust program when it comes to the two cohorts that we have, IT support and cybersecurity. But at the same time, it has a very important professional development component, because that piece of self-confidence is what is going to make them thrive as well and support the tech sector in our province. So we provide at the same time support with the resume building, the cover letter building, how to interview with confidence, people that building confidence despite isolations, networking opportunities. We also have, like Bill was saying, the networking opportunities through our program. And that is, they can meet with the industry professionals. And at the same time, we have career and advice panels with the tech sector. And we also have partnered with the Connector program. Through the Halifax Connector program has been incredible, and networking is fundamental, and not only for people who come from other countries, but overall, right? Especially if you're exploring a new sector, a new career, and whether you are reskilling or upskilling, networking is a huge part. It's that sense of building communities to connect and get connected. So it is very important. So that's one of the things that I would say that it's huge.
Must admit, I was waiting for somebody to bring up the other C word with confidence.
Right. And the mentorship, like, point. So I think that that mentorship professional development component it goes hand in hand. You can have all the technical skills, but if you don't have the confidence, there is something missing.
I appreciate you bringing, again, I think a great spotlight, and we could have a whole hour discussion just on that, but subsequent series or subsequent events to follow. So thank you, Judith, for your perspective there. And Wendy, I'm going to end this question from your perspective in terms of, you know, and again, kind of can go personal all the way to the organization. So when you think about, you know, others in similar roles to yourself and or other organizations like CASTL, or aspiring to figure out how they can play a role in reskilling or upskilling, what would be your words of encouragement to all of us, whether we are employers, not-for-profits, program directors? What do we need to be thinking about?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd say that any of us needs to think about is, you know, it sounds like such a simple thing, but really deeply asking, you know, yourself individually, but also organizationally, not only what is it we're doing, but the bigger question is, why are we doing it? And really taking the time that sometimes organizationally we don't feel we have, but which we absolutely need, which is, why are we doing it? Why? What's the, I mean, people get tired of me here, but it's like, what's the result we're trying to achieve? Because it's so easy to sort of get caught up in a process or but the reality is what is it that we're really trying to do? But the bigger question is why. And I do this little thing where, and I'm going to give you a little, it really works. Whatever it is you're trying to figure out personally, organizationally, collectively, ask the question why 5 times, you'll be astounded. You'll be astounded at what starts to, and we've done that here because that's just something I do all the time with any problem that comes my way. So I would say that. The other thing is, you know, and this back to the confidence point, none of us have all the answers, organizationally, individually, collectively as a community, but, you know, that's okay. It's all right to not have all of the answers. Again, it's always back to, but what are we trying to actually do here? I guess that's sort of where, yeah, that's what I would say is the bigger question is always why. And then the what follows. The other thing I would say about that is that I always say, because I've learned this in my lifetime as, you know, as a working woman, is that, you know, the reality is that work, it doesn't matter what the work is, work gets done through people. And sometimes when we're working on big projects or we've got new initiatives we want to get off the ground, we can get very caught up in the process piece, which is critically important to good planning. But the reality is all work is ultimately done through people. And when you're in a skill development or a skill building or a talent building kind of when you're doing that kind of work, your biggest tool that you have are your people who are actually getting those programs off the ground. So really think about the people part of all the process parts that need to be done. That's off the top of my head.
Love that. And I've that's the second time in as little as 2 months that somebody has brought up that ask why 5 times. So I think that's a great.
Interesting. Well, I'm just saying, you know what? It's a lucky charm. It seems to work. Sometimes it's terrifying when you go, oh, but you know what? It works. I swear it works.
I can appreciate that, as you say, in terms of big, big picture, big, you're trying to move the needle in really big ways, but understanding that those big ways come through iterative process design and, as you say, people. So I think that's a really important piece there to underscore. And we're going to flip perspective a little bit here because I've got a great question from the audience to kind of round us out as we come to, if you can believe it, almost the top of the hour. And this is from the perspective of, as somebody who may be considering reskilling or maybe switching career paths, I'll broaden it a little bit that way. Any advice and or things for them to consider, in addition to some of the nuggets that I think have already peppered through today's panel discussion, but any advice that you would give to somebody who's looking to reskill around, high level advice in general, and or how do they find what's right for them, maybe? And Bill, I'm going to come to you as somebody who made a decision, and maybe you weren't thinking of it through the lens of reskilling at the time, but you did leave, a career in the automobile industry to come back home to PEI and take over the family business. So I'm guessing there's some nuggets of wisdom there that just from your perspective, if any advice for somebody who's considering making a career shift, what comes to mind?
I guess my advice to someone would be, and this would be, mine was a substantial change, whether it's a substantial one or a mild one. Simply ask the questions, reach out to people in that industry, reach out to people in that community. Most people are excited to talk about what they do. So if you really want to know, like if you wanted to make a change to the baking industry or into the car business or something like that, get a hold of someone into the industry and just ask the questions, and maybe they'll provide you some direction as far as what would be the most direct way to get there. What would, if I did this, would this be valuable to you? Like if someone asked me as an employer, would it matter if I showed up with this experience, or would it matter if I've done this before? And it might seem obvious that this is the next step that I should take, but then you come and talk to me, and from a practical standpoint, that won't make any difference. So that might be a way of achieving it from the most efficient way. And not only that, the people in the industry or the area that you're looking to get in will be able to point you in the direction of programs or skill building things, or schooling or something which might help you get in that direction.
Awesome. I think that's a really great piece. And I'll just do a plug as well for organizations like the Chamber and like connector programs and like industry associations. Right?
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot out there. And I mean, that's quite frankly, that's how I ended up here. When I grew up in Prince Edward Island, I lived away for the better part of 15 to 20 years. So my entire professional career was away from what I would call home. So when I came back here, the people that I knew had probably moved or done something else and come back. And so it very much felt like starting from scratch and from square one. And my wife moved here with me. She's from Ontario. So when she came here, she very much started from nothing as well. She's a teacher. She volunteered at schools before she could get actual jobs. And that kind of helped you get a foot in the door as far as what is actually happening in this particular market. I joined the Chamber and started going to some of their social events in the evenings. And And that was a way of reestablishing yourself in a bit of a professional industry. And that's where programs, PEI connectors, networking opportunities through chamber social events, though that's where stuff like that becomes very important, and becoming a part of that community we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And we're going to take 30 more seconds, or we're going to take a minute next, and then I'll get Luke to kind of round us out. So 30-ish seconds, Wendy and Judith. Advice to somebody who's considering reskilling. What comes to mind for you? And Judith, you're unmuted, so you're up first.
I feel as if there are two very important things. One of them is that things happen for a reason. So if you had already the opportunity to do some planning, that first see what are your strengths. That is very important. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. What are your strengths? Once you have identified that, try to look something that you have always wanted to do. Have the confidence. There are programs out there like Wendy's, like Digital Nova Scotia. There are many programs for many sectors that have been now started due to COVID as well. So have that confidence. Go out there, do your research. Research is fundamental. Ask questions. Don't be afraid. This is a change of life that is going to be, it's a great opportunity for you to do whatever you really want to do. And there are people, programs like ours that can help you all the way. So I would say that those two things are I would say they would be fundamental.
Awesome. Thank you. And Wendy, closing remarks on this advice, over to you.
Well, to echo Judith's point, I think take the time to, regardless of the situation, take the time to really know your strengths. And also, I would also add to that, your joys. What actually motivates you? What actually makes you happy to do? We spend so much of we all know this, we spend more hours at work than we do anywhere else. So it is important on some level to know, to enjoy what it is you do. So definitely, know your strengths. And if you absolutely know that you really would never find joy in doing something, then stay open to other things. It's okay to not want to do everything. With that in mind, and I'll try to wrap it up and sort of circle back to Bill's point, is around, connecting. If you do know there's something you're interested in, you think you might be, but you don't know enough about it to really make an informed decision. There are all kinds of groups out there. And I know in every province, not just here in PEI, but there is always some sort of type of like a career development services. And very often there are so many programs out there that most of us, even working in the skills development sphere, don't necessarily know about. So, connect to those groups, because they do. And sometimes the thing you're looking for is the thing you don't even know until you know it. So yeah, I would just end there. Keep an open mind. And it's okay if you hate something, don't do it. You don't need to do something you hate. Life is too short for that. I'm with the COVID kids on that one. So there you go. Oh, Bill's got his.
It's very fair, I think, in that point, in terms of lots of great nuggets and wisdom there. And Bill, you probably get 30 seconds before I think we're going to close it.
It's just funny listening to the discussion. There was a piece of advice given to a group of us when I was in college, and I've never forgotten this. I can't say as I necessarily followed this advice necessarily, but but I had someone come in and speak to us and said, if you're trying to figure out what you really want to do in life, take your top 3 things that you like. Take number 2 or 3 and make a career out of it. Take number 1, keep that for yourself, and make number 2 and 3 a priority to look towards, and see if you can make a career out of it. And it'll be something you enjoy. You'll always still have a hobby. So
Good advice.
Well said. And what great closing remarks. I will just say my thank you to all 3 of you for sharing today, your passion for the topic, and your authenticity in sharing stories. Thank you for giving us some of your time today in that. And Luke, over to you to close us out on this great conversation.
Thanks, Chantel, and thank you everyone for joining. Panelists. I think what resonated with me was, the prep for the present and planning for the future, being passionate and know that you're in charge, and to help develop that confidence. I was displaced after 20 years. I spent 8 months building that confidence again, understanding that what was out there and learning that there's an ecosystem of supports and great organizations within communities that are there to help support those individuals who are looking to pivot or reskill, upskill. And you don't know it until you actually start to peel back the onion and you meet the likes of Bill and Wendy and Judith. And so I really think about what community is, and that it's a part of that ecosystem. It's those organizations, it's entrepreneurs, it's chambers who are there to network, engage, and show you a path that is available that you might not quite see yet because you're still in this, transition and building that confidence. And it's a test of your resilience. And I think what's really interesting is as a community, how it is we all play a part to help support each other, attract, retain, and help pay it forward so that the community can prosper. And that prosperity is the up to the individual and the individual's prosperity and how they grow and contribute and give back. So thank you so much. It was an awesome discussion. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with everyone here today. So have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.